Weird just got played, and we are gaming through mechanisms. So what does that mean? Well, when you're playing a board game, there's a lot of different ways that you can interact with the game, how things work. We call those things mechanisms. And, we like to break those down, give them labels and stuff like that. So when we're talking about games, you know what we're talking about. So the mechanism that we're going to talk about today is cooperative play. And cooperative play is really simple. It means that it's all of the players versus the game. Either all of the players win together or the game wins and all the players lose together. You'll hear weird spinoffs on that and solo games. Also, are not cooperative games. You have to have more than 2 players to cooperate. So that's a whole different category.
What if I have 2 voices in my head? Does that count?
Yes, it does.
Counts for something.
I mean, there are plenty of cooperative games that you could just play solo, even if they're not designed to be played that way. Some of them you can't because of how the rules prevent that. But anyway, we're going to tell you today what each of us individually are going to say what our 2 favorite cooperative games are. And we're also going to tell you from our People's Choice poll, what are the 2 most iconic cooperative games that are out there. All right. You all ready to get started?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to start with Erock. So Erock, I know you love cooperative games. Tell me what your favorite one is.
Hello. Excellent. I get to lead us off. I get to lead us off with my favorite game and the number 1 game of all time as ranked by the users of Board Game Geek. And that game, if you haven't heard me say it enough throughout the course of your time watching our channel, that is Gloomhaven. I love Gloomhaven. I say it like that every time because I love Gloomhaven. It is fantastic. It's kind of a complicated co-op as far as it goes. A lot of things are more simple in the mechanisms and whatnot going on. It presents itself like you wait your turn, Lloyd. Hold on. It presents itself like a dungeon crawl.
It is.
But you and all the people you're playing with are trying to beat the game mission by mission. It gives you a branching story that, depending upon the choices that you make and the things that you do in the different missions, you branches off into different paths. Sometimes it closes down paths because you made certain decisions and opens up other ones. The world itself is fantastic. I love it. I love the open world, the connected, the pathways, the missions that lead upon missions, the way that the decisions that you make influence the map and the game itself. Every individual mission is fantastic. You just, in a very brief nutshell, you use a hand of cards. In every round, you choose 2 of them. And one of them you use a top action, one of them you use a bottom action. And one of those cards, the one you lay on top, is going to be your initiative. And then just everybody does the same thing in secret. But the spirit of the game is you can talk about the things that you can do, but you're not supposed to give numbers out. Like, I'm going 4. That would be really early. I'm going 4. You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say things like, I'm going to go really early and I hope to kill that guy in front of you before you go, so that you can kind of coordinate your movements between you. And then also, all of the monsters have their own initiative as well. So even if you have the clearest plan of action that you could possibly make between everybody playing, when you flip those monster initiatives over, after you flip yours, of course, then you see sometimes that just threw a monkey wrench into everything. Now the thing that you were going to walk up to and kill and that your friend was going to help you and now you have advantage. Nope, he went first and he moved across the room. Now you just screwed your whole plan up. And that's one of the things I actually love about this game is the versatility of the things that you play with. Because like I said, you use a top action on one card and a bottom action on another card. And probably about 80% of the time, you definitely know which one of those you're doing. Probably even more. Like you're planning out like 95 to 99% of the time. You probably are like, I'm going to use this top and I'm going to use this bottom. But then things happen and you have to adapt. And sometimes the best thing to do is just throw that plan out the window and go with the other top and the other bottom and just adapt and do your best with what you got. I absolutely love the game. It's fantastic. If you're new to it, I would highly recommend starting with Jaws of the Lion or playing it on Steam. Either way, I think you're going to get a better experience than if you just buy this game off the shelf and try to understand everything that's going on here. To be clear, I don't think it's very complicated, except for the monster movement. There's just a whole lot going on, except for the monster movement, which is complicated. And you can download charts and everything off of the Geek to try to help you navigate where the monsters go. That's why I would recommend starting with the other ones, because Jaws of the Lion brings you in slowly, and the Steam version just takes care of all the monster movement. You just play yourself. So anyway, I've spoken probably hours and hours if you combine it all together about Gloomhaven, but that is my number one game, and also currently still the number one game of all time as ranked on the Geek. Gloomhaven.
Yep, and Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is up there pretty high too. I think in the top 5. So.
Yeah,
is it really? Is it up that high?
Yeah, it's up there. I don't know how high, but it's up there.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to Tiffany next. Tiffany, what is your favorite cooperative game?
So my very favorite cooperative game is Aeon's End Legacy. It takes Aeon's End, which is a fun co-op game, and it turns it into a legacy game where you can build your story as you go and affect the story as it plays out. It's really interesting. I think one of the neatest things that I like about Aeon's End is it's a deck builder, but when you get your cards, when you play your cards, they go to like a discard area or like a tentative discard, and then you choose how you discard them. You really very thoughtfully discard your cards, and then instead of shuffling your deck when you're done, you just flip it over and you start drawing from the top, and you go from there. And so I think that's a really interesting mechanism that I like about Aeon's End, and so I think that it makes the game a little unique. But it's a co-op game, so I chose it for my my co-op option because it's probably one of my favorite co-ops, and I knew that my very favorite co-ops were probably like Gloomhaven going to be picked on tonight, so I wouldn't have to worry about those getting covered. So I went something that I knew may not get mentioned. So Aeon's End Legacy was my pick.
So what makes it legacy? Do you like tear up some stuff or stick?
Yeah, actually, that version, Aeon's End Legacy, there's like 6 or 7 different chapters in Aeon's End, but this specific chapter is Legacy. Yes, you got stickers, you tear things up. The choices that you make affect the cards that enter the game. Just a side note to this was on my short list of, I think somebody else is going to mention it, so I didn't mention it also. So, but there's another thing I really love about this game. This game has one of my favorite mechanisms, which is who's going next, which is like you make a deck of cards out of all the people and the enemies, and you shuffle them up, and then when it's somebody's turn, you flip it over and see who's going next. I absolutely love that. That's also in 1776, which I love a lot. I think that adds an added level to the game where it's really hard to, quarterback this because you never know who's going to go next. And that makes a huge difference on how you play the game. So I love this game too. Sorry. Hijack.
So that's a legacy game. Is Gloomhaven a campaign game?
Technically, yes, it's a campaign game.
Okay, because that's interesting because my pick for my favorite cooperative game is definitely a campaign game, and that is Mechs versus Minions.
Oh, nice!
Hey,
yeah.
Good.
So Mechs versus Minions, we've talked about it before. It is a beautiful production, especially for the price point. And it is, as I said, a campaign game. You're going through a series of missions to, ultimately defeat the bad boss, and you're, it's got sort of a legacy feel to it because you unlock new stuff as you go through. You don't actually destroy anything or sticker anything. You can reset everything and play the game again. So it's not really legacy, but it's co-op obviously, but it's a programming game. And a lot of programming games can be annoying because people are just constantly screwing up what you're trying to do, whether on purpose or accident. But in a co-op game, I find like that's okay, right? Everybody has got a similar goal. I'm trying to get rid of these minions. I'm trying to do this thing, push that bomb, whatever the heck it is you're trying to do. And so you still get that sort of hilarity of the program not working out, especially because your program can get screwed up by taking damage, which is fun. So, but like, it never feels like, somebody just screwed up my plans and they did it on purpose, right? Which can be, frustrating in a longer programming game. And these missions can run, a little long, some of them. But anyway, yeah, beautiful production, programming in a way that I like it because it's cooperative. And it's even got this sort of timed component where you're drafting the cards to put in your program, which can help eliminate. I haven't mentioned this before, but one of the big problems with the cooperative play is the alpha player problem. So that's just what you were talking about, Erock, where somebody's trying to quarterback the whole game for everybody else. And then basically it's one person playing and everybody else just sitting around listening to that one person, right? And that's not necessarily so fun for everybody, and different games deal with it in different ways. So this one has a timed element to help deal with that. It's also just got a lot going on with what's going on in your program. I can't imagine somebody actually quarterbacking all four of the players, So yeah, anyway, Mechs versus Minions, beautiful production. Check it out if you ever get a chance.
Great game. Absolutely.
I'm super glad you picked it.
Well, rather than playing the game to see if this was Erock's number 2 and I could slip another game in here, I just decided to tell you my favorite game.
It was my number 2. Now I get to speak about something else.
I knew it. All right. Well, so we've got Legacy, we've got Campaign. Lloyd, is your favorite co-op Legacy or Campaign?
No. No, but so I assume at some point, maybe in the future, we're going to do a semi-co-op video. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of torn here because the game that I would pick is technically out of the box a semi-co-op, but I only play it cooperatively. So
it's okay.
I don't think I'm going to talk about that one because technically, if you play it by the rules,
you could pick it if you only play it co-op. Go ahead.
I could, but by the rules, it is a semi-cooperative game. And then they did a spinoff, which is strictly co-op. But so I'm not going to talk about my favorite game that I play co-op. I will talk about a strictly co-op that I really like, and that is the Big Book of Madness. So the Big Book of Madness is like Harry Potter. You're playing a wizard or a witch or warlock, where you're good. So I guess it's a wizard and a witch. You're at a school, and there's the Big Book of Madness that you're not supposed to touch. And the instructors have told you, don't touch this book. And being, a precocious child wizard, you decide, I'm going to go open the book. And when you open the book, it lets out all these horrible monsters. And so you have to basically go page by page through this book and defeat not necessarily all of the monsters, but you need to defeat, at the very least, the final monster. But you can pick and choose which ones you want to kind of just like, we don't want to waste resources on this guy. His end game condition isn't so bad. So you don't have to beat everything, but you do need to defeat these monsters. And if you don't defeat enough of them, you will lose, just because they'll pile up and the negative effects will kill you anyway. So essentially, this is a deck builder. However, the deck that you're building isn't necessarily cards that allow you to do powers or actions. The deck that you're building is a series of different elements. So there's fire, water, earth, and wind. And then if you get the expansion, you get the fifth element, which is just called the fifth element. So
it's Lilu.
If you've seen the movie, you know what the fifth element is. But each monster has a specific number of symbols associated with them, or the elements. So you'll know off the book, it kind of gives you a preview of the next page that says, hey, you're going to need these 3 symbols or these 4 symbols. So you know kind of what to prepare for the next monster that's coming. You don't know which mix of those symbols or how many you're going to need, but you do know that those symbols are going to come out and you're going to need to do those. You won't necessarily know the specific order until you flip the page. However, you do get to buy spells that will allow you to do extra cool things on your turn. And one of the reasons why I like this game is because it kind of negates the quarterbacking issue, because this game, instead of everybody kind of doing their own thing on their turn, like normal deck builders or a lot of co-op games, in this game, if you're not communicating and bouncing between each other, like on my turn, I may play a card into my reserve so that you can use it on your next turn. However, you might already have cards that you can use in your hand. So I may decide to use one of my powers that allows another player to take a turn or two, and then they can fire off and use, defeat a bad guy, and then they can fire off a power to let somebody else take a turn. And you really have to ping pong between all the players. So you're actively involved in every turn, but there's no real way to be like, okay, you do this and I do this and you do that. It's kind of comes down to like, hey, I don't really have much I can do this turn with this guy. Is there something you want to do? Because I can give you like 5 actions right now. So you kind of bounce around. So it's a cool little deck builder. The cards you're getting are just elemental symbols, and they have 1s, 2s, and 3s. So you want to get the higher ones into your deck and get rid of the lower ones. And then you want to avoid madness. Madness is the easiest way to lose the game. If you get too many madness in a turn, you lose. If you run out of madness cards in the deck, you lose. And if you don't beat the final boss, the final bad guy in the book, you lose. And the book is different every time you play. You choose a different cover, which has one of the 4 or 5 monsters. Then you choose a bunch of random middle pages, and then you choose a random end page. So your book is always going to be different, and you'll get different versions of this big book of madness every time you play. So I'm going to go with Big Book of Madness because I like how co-op-y it is. It's not me taking my turn and doing something and then passing. It's really forcing players to interact, because if you don't interact, you're going to lose. There's not enough resources in your hand or in front of you to do what you need to do each turn for the most part. You're usually short 1 or 2 symbols, and another player might have it, and it's coordination to get it in the right space to be able to take advantage of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hallmark of a good cooperative game, right? Getting everybody to work together in an optimal way without, having somebody quarterback it, like you said. So, yeah, I have not played it, but it's pretty interesting. I mean, it sounds pretty interesting.
It's definitely one of those games that I love that not many people will play with me, because it's often compared to beating your head against a brick wall. So
it's brutal. Yes,
it is very difficult. Yes.
Well,
but I love difficult games.
Well, speaking of difficult and speaking of brutal, I guess I'll just go ahead and jump in here and start with my second favorite co-op game, because this is the game that I think most people think of when they think of original brutal co-ops. I wouldn't be surprised if the win rate of this game is about 80%. Is about 20%. And that is Robinson Crusoe.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So Robinson Crusoe is a brutal game. And thematically that actually fits, right? Because you're there's a bunch of different scenarios, but you're basically on this island and trying to survive, and there's all this stuff that you have to do to survive. And it's not just survive. There's always some goal. Like in the first scenario, you're trying to gather enough wood to light a signal fire to get rescued, but the weather gets worse as the game goes on, and that gets punishing, and your food perishes, if you don't eat it in time, and these animals come out of nowhere and wound you. So you need to have built a shelter, and you need to have gotten weapons, and you need to collect this wood, and you need to feed yourself, and you got to deal with the roof for the weather. It's just like, there's no way you can do everything. And one of the interesting mechanisms is that every character has like I guess you call it a day and a night action, like basically 2 action points, for the turn, for the day. And you decide, am I gonna what am I gonna do with those two? And you could double up two things to guarantee success at whatever it is you're going to do, right? Okay, I'm going to go explore or do whatever. Or you can split up and you can take your chances and say, I'm going to spend one action doing this, one action doing that. Nobody's helping me with those. And so now I'm going to roll a die and see if I succeeded. I took a wound, or I succeeded and something bad happened, whatever. And you can't play it safe the whole game, right? If you play it safe the whole game, you don't have enough actions to do everything you need to do. So you basically have to push your luck in that regard. And, I think that's what makes the game fun, trying to balance, this thing has to succeed. So we have to use two actions here. So all this other stuff we have to gamble on. And I also think that helps defeat the alpha player problem, the quarterbacking we're talking about, because there is no right answer. Because the outcome comes from a die roll, there is no I have the right optimal solution, because you don't know what that is, right? And there are event cards that are coming up and cards coming out of decks. There's enough randomness here that nobody can just quarterback the game and have the optimal solution in their head. So yeah, I think I like co-op games like this, sort of heavier ones, to have this low success rate. I think I've read people say about 20% success rate, and the designer, I think, said that was about right. I have a higher success rate than that, but probably that could just be luck. I don't know. But yeah, it's they reprinted this game recently, like a fancy version, and theoretically cleaned up the rule book for the third time, because the rule book is a bear. But it is worth getting through and playing. And I just, there were so many co-ops I could have chosen here, and maybe we'll talk about some other categories of co-ops at the end. But I just felt like these meaty co-ops, like Mechs versus Minions, there's a lot of meat on the bone there. Robinson Crusoe, there's a lot of meat on the bone there. Those were the ones that I wanted to talk about today, because that's what I first think of when somebody says co-op to me. I don't think of some of the lighter experiences that are out there. I think of these really involved games. So anyway, my second choice, Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Island, I think is the full title. All right. So Tiffany, what have you got for us?
All right. So my second choice, I decided to go with a game that has gotten to the table probably second most for the games that we play. Probably first most that gets to the table is Gloomhaven, and that's not really anymore since there's a digital version, but it got a lot of table time. But this one gets a lot of table time too, usually because my son is asking us to play. So the game that I picked is MicroMacro Crime City. And it's, some would say, maybe more of an activity, less of a game, but I still think it's a co-op activity that's like a game, so it's pretty fun. But it comes with a big map that kind of shows a lot of different scenarios through time, and you have to use the clues that you can come across to solve the mysteries and work your way through these crimes. And it comes with, I don't know how many little envelopes of cards of these missions or whatever that you have to achieve, but I'd say we're almost done with the game, and we've gotten so much play out of this, and it's just a really good time for the whole family. Anybody can participate as long as they can see close enough, like these small details. But it's a lot of fun and probably one of our family favorites. And I heard some friends of ours went on a cruise, and they went on a board gaming cruise and played this. And I guess they just magneted it to the wall because everything's metal. And so they magneted it to the wall, and they just kind of played here and there, which I thought was a fun idea. So, yeah. So
how do you lose when you're playing it?
I guess you don't technically lose. I guess technically you give up. We didn't figure it out. Okay. What's the answer? I guess that would be losing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really fun. If you haven't played it, play it. It's really fun.
Yeah,
it's a great family. Before the game came out, they had some web version where you could get an experience of it.
Oh, okay.
And so I played it that way. I also have a little promo case.
That's cool.
Extra for the game. So next time I see you all, I'll have to give that to you since you're running out of stuff.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, just if you go to the store and look at it, it gives you an introductory case right on the box. Like, you don't have to take it out of shrink or anything. You can get an idea and a feel for the game just by playing the one that's actually on the box. So that's really cool.
And it kind of gives you an idea of how to understand, how to wrap your brain around a depiction through time, because it doesn't really make sense until you see it. And you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, that game got a lot of buzz when it first came out, partially because it was something different, but also just because it's fun, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's go back to Lloyd for his second pick.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like I keep choosing deck builders. That is one of my favorite game mechanics, but I'm also trying to do the mental gymnastics to figure out which games will fit into which categories for later videos that we may get to. So I'm trying to figure out which games I want to talk about. Because clearly everything that I own is my favorite games. Otherwise I wouldn't own them. But I think I'm going to fall back on the strict co-op version of Legendary, which is Legendary Encounters. And I kind of want to go with Firefly, but the art is so ugly in that game that it makes me not want to play it. But they introduced some new things that are in Firefly that I kind of want to pick it, even though it's just hurts your eyes. It burns to look at it. So I think I'm gonna go with that. I was tied between that and Legendary Encounter Aliens, just because Aliens is super brutal, and it really gives you the feeling that you're up against something that you can't win. You can't win against. But I'm gonna go with Firefly because they added so many little iterative changes that made it much more fun to play. Even if it does look like, like Microsoft Paint, like graphics on all the templates. They're just, aside from the art, it's just the graphic design on it is just bad. The GUI, the UI that they chose. But in Firefly Legendary Encounters, you are essentially playing different episodes from the show. And if you want, you can actually play the episodes in order and do it as one long campaign. But that's one of the things they added. One of the other things they added is the actual ship, Serenity, it's a Firefly class ship, and the ship is named Serenity, yes.
Right.
You always get confused. They added the ship Serenity as a character in the game. It's an extra thing that you need to maintain and upgrade in order to get the most out of your game. But essentially what you're doing, you're just like the Legendary games, you're building a deck of cards. The encounters use a very specific, it's not a random deck. Basically you have 3 acts to each deck of the story you're playing, and you kind of shuffle those together. You put in very specific cards, you shuffle them together, and then kind of stack them up. Act 3 on the bottom, then 2, then 1. Every character or every player gets a particular character. And in this one, the characters don't mix into the deck. They're just a card that sits out in front of you that gives you a specific power each turn. And your deck is typically like a normal deck builder. You're just going to get cards that are related to different characters in the game. But then, like I said, they have this cool aspect of upgrading the ship, and the ship can take damage. And that's one of the loss conditions is if your ship takes too much damage, you can actually lose. But the way the game plays is you have a row of places where the cards are going to come out. You don't know what the cards are because they come out face down, and you have to spend action points essentially to reveal the cards in order to actually do anything with them. And they won't do anything to you until they get to a specific point. Now, this is specific to the Legendary Encounters system. Whereas typical Legendary, when the card comes out, it flips over and stuff will happen whenever the card reveals, or whenever you fight the card, or when it leaves the city spaces. Legendary Encounters uses a similar mechanism, but they all pool up at the end. And the longer you let those cards pool there, the more and more damage that they're going to do and have negative effects. So you have a certain amount of time to figure out what the cards are, how to defeat them before they get into the spot where they start attacking you back. And that's essentially how Legendary Encounters plays. It's completely co-op, but it falls more into that kind of category of I'm not going to do a whole lot on everybody else's turns. There are cards that allow you to coordinate, so I can give you a card on my turn, on your turn, to help you with your turn to get through something. But then they have like that ship, and you need to maintain. So everyone kind of has to maintain that ship together. And then, like I said, they have a campaign where as you accrue wounds throughout the game, they'll stay in your deck. So when you go to the next story in the chapter, the next episode of the show, all of your damage on your ship and all the damage you've taken will carry over. So you have to kind of manage that. And if you go into the next episode with too much damage, then you could lose the game because you die. So I'm going to go with that. I mean, Legendary Encounters overall, they're both brutal. I just like the extra aspects they mixed into the Firefly. I just wish the art was better so that people would want to play it, because it looks bad. So
Legendary Encounters Firefly is the game where I finally decided that I should give up trying to get my gaming group to play co-ops. So I got the game and we played it, and it just did not go over well. I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'll quit trying to get them to play co-ops.
Stop trying.
Yeah, we actually went back because I have the Firefly on DVD, and my son had never watched it. Like, I watch Serenity a lot. Serenity is one of the movies that if it's on, even if it's 45 minutes in, I will stop and watch it. If when it was on cable. So I have a soft spot for Firefly. So we actually went back and watched the entire season. The only season.
The season.
Right. The season. So that we could play the game and have a better, like, oh, so this is the guy that did this. And so it holds a special little place in my heart because of that. But
well,
me too.
Ugly.
If you have an Audible membership, they have lots of free Firefly audiobooks. I just finished listening to one today, actually. So just FYI, there's probably more of those out there than episodes of the show.
Yeah, there's only like 10 episodes, 13. It got canceled mid-season, so.
Yeah. All right, cool. So Erock, I think we're down to your second pick, which we'll just skip you because I gave you Mechs versus Minions, right? So no, what are you going to jump in with since I gave you that one?
I like it. Dave gave me Aeon's End. You gave me that one. I have a feeling when we get to the People's Choice, another one of my favorites is going to get mentioned. So I'm going rogue on this. So for my second choice, I'm choosing Sleeping Gods. We haven't played a ton of this game, but I really like what we've played. All right. For what it's worth, I think we've played just about every Ryan Lockett game at this point. There might have been one or two here or there that we did miss. So we've been kind of following along. Probably more so than Babe. I've been playing a lot of his, like, even back in the day kind of stuff, like City of Iron. I love that game. That game's fantastic. The one in space, whatever that one's called. I like that game a lot. Like, I just like his style. I think his art, for those of you not in the know that I'm, very cockily trying to talk about, is he makes everything. When I say Ryan Lockett, I mean Red Raven Games is Ryan Lockett. He does everything. At this point, I think he's got his whole family wrapped into this, so they're all helping out. But like, all of it is him. It's all his own mind. The art, the story, the game, the concept, the mechanisms, everything. It's all coming out of this one guy's mind. The production, he does all the production himself, everything. It's an impressive operation. I can't even imagine how he pulls it off. But Sleeping God seems to me to be the culmination of everything that he's been working for lately, because he kind of started this whole story game pretty much with Above and Below, which was a lot of Euro, a little story, and then that became Near and Far, which was kind of half Euro, half story, and then the next one was Now and Then, and it kind of evolved a little bit farther. And I think Sleeping Gods is really just the pinnacle of this whole thing. I think it can be most aptly compared to games like Seventh Continent and Tainted Grail, in that it's an open world, But I think that this is even more of an open world than those games. I feel like those games are kind of on a rail. You start at a very specific place, and you need to go to a very specific place. And a lot of the times, it kind of funnels you a certain way. Both of those games, Tainted Grail more so than Seventh Continent, but still the same kind of thing. Whereas this is more like, we're going to drop you in a boat in the middle of the ocean, and you can do whatever you want. And you can really do whatever you want. And it's amazing, this giant open world of adventure out there. And it's not a grind. It's not, who are we going to fight next? What's the next battle? It could be anything. You never know. You find some mysterious thing, and it opens up this new chapter of what's going on. You talk to people. Imagine that. Talk to people to make decisions and progress the game and things. I think it's actually fantastic. And there's one thing that he did in this that I think really elevates this game is these games like I said, Seventh Continent, Tainted Grail, this ilk, they combine the mundane machinery of just staying alive with exploration. And this game separated the two of them. You basically have 2 turns on your turn. You do a thing like make food or fix the ship or heal some wounds, and then you do an action like out on the board to do stuff. And I think this is fantastic because, like I said, half the time in Seventh Continent, you're just trying to stay alive. You know what I'm saying? There's not a whole lot of adventuring going on sometimes. You're worried about the food. You're going to die. It's how do we stay alive? And this game, it's just magnificent how those two things kind of split off so that you can concentrate on the survival as half of what you're doing, but it's not really related to the other half. So it's not going to creep into the other side and taint what you're doing there. And I think that's really an awesome evolution of the genre, and I can't wait to play some more. So, Sleeping Gods. That's my number 2.
Nice. Good choice. All right. Did I get everybody's second choice?
Indeed.
All right. So I was a little surprised. I don't think because I was thinking a little bit about the alpha gamer, the quarterbacking problem. I don't think anybody mentioned a game that mitigates that through limited communication.
That's true.
Yeah, so that's a popular way to deal with that problem.
Gloomhaven a little bit, but
it does. Okay.
I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, you're not really supposed to say, "I'm going on 4. You can go after that."
Well,
know?
Yeah.
But I mean, you can, and if you play online, you pretty much do. So,
yeah. I'm thinking more like some classic card games like Hanabi. Or the Crew, where those are cooperative and they're only fun because they have limited information. We're going to talk about a game, People's Choice, here that I think is supposed to have limited information, but nobody plays it that way. So interesting. All right, cool. Well, let's just get into the People's Choice then. And the People's Choice, number 1, far and away, 800-pound gorilla in the room, is really an entire franchise and collection of games that come from Forbidden Island to Forbidden Desert to the original Pandemic to all the spin-offs on Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy and etc. So Pandemic is the sort of iconic cooperative game. It isn't the first cooperative game. I don't even know if it's the most popular cooperative game. I think it is now. I think it is the most rated game on BGG, by the way.
Gloomhaven's the most popular.
Well, I don't think it's the most popular as in most people that play it.
Oh, I'm just number 1. So that's popular.
Yeah, it's Gloomhaven is the highest rated, but Pandemic has the most ratings, which implies that a lot more people actually play Pandemic. And I think Pandemic is probably sold in a lot more places than you would see Gloomhaven.
Oh, it's all over. It's ubiquitous. Everybody.
Yeah, exactly. It is one of those games that is crossed over from our little niche hobby into the broader, awareness of people who don't, who think Monopoly is the standard of board games. And so anyway, but actually, so let's talk a little bit about Pandemic. I think I should throw this over to Lloyd to talk about Pandemic because it's sitting there right over his right shoulder.
Oh, that one is right behind me. There's a Pandemic. There's a Pandemic Cthulhu. There's a Pandemic Rapid Response. Over
All right,
here,
well,
there's the World of Warcraft. Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about the basics of Pandemic?
Okay, so the basics of pretty much all the Pandemic games, no matter which version you play, there is a map with cities or places. They're interconnected and with like specific routes. They're separated into multiple color groups. I don't think anything's broken away from the 4 color groups. I don't think. And some of them, I don't know, I think even the ones I haven't played, like Fall of Rome, those still use like 4 different groups of the barbarians. But basically there's 4 colors. In the base Pandemic, they're diseases that you need to cure. And that is represented by cubes that come out on the board and go into the city spaces. And when too many get into one space of one color, you have a outbreak, and it moves along those connected routes to other cities. The way that the cubes get on the board is there is a little deck of cards that have one of each city that's on the map. And whenever you flip those cards over at the end of the turn, you're going to flip to start with. I think all of them start with flipping 2. And then as the game gets worse, you're going to increase how many cards you flip after X amount of things happen. So it's a couple rounds of 2s, then a few of 3s, and then it gets really bad if you let it get bad, and it goes up to 4. So every time you flip one of those cards, you're going to put those cubes out into that specific city. And eventually you're going to have to shuffle those cards that are in the discard back onto the pile. So you have a pretty good idea of where your hotspots are going to be throughout the game. There's another deck of cards that are the player cards, and those have also cities in them. And that is how you cure the different diseases. You have to have X amount of a particular card type and be in a particular place, a research station in the base game. And from there, you can cure one of those diseases, which allows the player actions to remove them to basically get boosted, and you can clear them a lot easier. And if you do really good, you can completely eradicate them to the point where you don't even have to worry about those colors of disease, those cubes coming out ever again. Each player has a different role. In the base game, it is like a dispatcher that allows you to move other people on your turn. You have a doctor person. I don't know exactly what his term is, but that person
Medic.
can cure the cubes with one action instead of one action per cube. They can cure everything on the turn. You have a scientist that allows you to use less cards to be able to find the cure, and so on. There's all these different powers. And on your turn, you basically get a couple actions. You're going to move around the board, and you're going to collect cards and try to get rid of those cubes. Because if you have too many cubes on the board, bad things happen. There's typical game loss conditions, multiple game loss conditions. If you have the outbreak track gets too high, or is that the epidemic track? I forget what the little track is. Every time you basically have an outbreak, it goes up 1. I forget what the term for that one is, but all of them have that similar track in them. If it ever gets too high, you lose. If you run out of the deck of cards, the player cards, you lose. If you haven't won by that point, you lose. Time's run out. And if you ever need to put cubes out on the board of a particular color and there's no cubes left in the supply, you've let the world go to hell and you lose. And that's pretty much the basics for pretty much every version of Pandemic. The legacy versions, the ones that I have behind me with Cthulhu, they all do slightly different things, but the base is controlling bad stuff from happening on the board and working together to not have that, to clear the board and reach your end goal, which in most of them is to cure all 4 of the diseases. But there's different versions. They put out ones like in each year in different countries. So they have like an Iberia one. They have one for the Netherlands with dams and floods. They have the fall of Rome, which is all about being a Roman emperor and or being the city of Rome, whatever whatever it's considered, and you're trying to fight off the barbarian hordes. World of Warcraft, they just announced the Star Wars one.
Yeah.
So the only one that does anything different is Legacy 2, where you want
spoiler
on the board versus off the board. I'm not gonna get into spoiler. I haven't played past the first month, but this one reverses the formula. Having the board empty is bad versus having the board full being bad.
But yeah, talk about being ubiquitous, maybe even jumping the shark. Star Wars, the Clone Wars, a pandemic game, I don't know.
Maybe we could add a few more words to that title.
Yeah, right. I think it might be based on that Fall of Rome, so maybe they could.
This one's worse. Look how many words are in this one. It's World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King, a pandemic system game.
Indeed.
Nice.
Well, for the record, Pandemic Legacy was the other one that I figured was going to be said in one way or another. Pandemic being the catch-all. But yeah, I love Pandemic Legacy. I think it's fantastic. So great choice by the people.
I also think it's interesting that they will run pandemic tournaments where teams will all sit down at different tables, and then all the decks, the two different decks Lloyd talked about, they're exactly the same at each table. And so it's just a question of who's going to win the fastest and to advance to the next round or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a pretty cool concept. And I've never participated myself, but I hear it's really fun too. I guess if you really like Pandemic. All right. Well, so that mentioned that was clear, far and away the winner for the people's poll from that we do here on Discord and Facebook to see, what we should talk about is a co-op game we should definitely not miss. But interestingly enough, the other one is an older game that has had several different versions. And that is Arkham Horror.
Okay.
So Arkham Horror has inspired
Good
a lot of
for you,
other
Arkham Horror,
games.
making the people's choice. All right.
And so I'll talk about it a little bit first because I played the original, which was from 1987, I think. So I played this in the late 80s. My brother got a copy of this and we played it. And what was new to me was the fact that you could play this board game solo, right? Like I had never played a game solo before. I didn't even know that was a thing, I had played some, like Avalon Hill type games, and, I had played just standard other types of games like Monopoly and whatever, and Risk and Axis and Allies, Milton Bradley games or whatever, but gosh, yeah, solo. I'd only ever done that on the computer. So I thought that was incredibly interesting, going around and trying to collect items with these characters and not get killed and I close gates or whatever, so yeah, that was the original version. And then I think that changed a lot between then and the next printing of it. When was the next version of it?
What, second edition?
Second edition.
That was a long time ago. That's got to be 15, 20 years.
Yeah. Okay. And did you play second edition? 90s,
yeah.
I played second edition. Yes.
All right. So what's special about second edition?
What's special about it?
Whoopsie.
Is this a quiz?
Well, you've played it. So
yeah.
2005.
2005. Almost 20
That's what
years.
my box says.
Wow. I wasn't a big fan of second edition. I appreciated the game. I could see the appeal, but it just seemed to be too long and samey for me, and especially the people that I was playing with. And it was punishing. And I don't mean it was like punishing like Big Book of Madness where you just lose. I mean it was punishing like you could spend a whole bunch of time in a portal trapped there while everybody else plays the game for an hour and a half. Like it was rough, man. So overall, I appreciated that game, but I wasn't a big fan. And we just recently played third edition. I liked that. I thought it was really cool. I thought they integrated a lot of the mechanisms from Arkham Horror, the card game, which was on my very, very short list for this video because I absolutely love that. But a lot of that, like the bag building aspect, it's not bag building. That's a different mechanism. I don't want to get into all that. But instead of giving you 8 million custom dice, they give you a bag with tokens. And then that's how you modify what's going on in the situation, just like in the card game. Like, you know what I'm saying? If you want to make it harder, you throw a little couple more harder tokens in it. If you want to make it easier, you pull some of that stuff out. And like different scenarios, put different things in there. So I just really like that functionality of it. They integrated a whole lot of the storytelling I felt like Arkham Horror 2nd Edition told a story if you paid attention to what was going on in the game. You know what I'm saying?
It was very random. Like stuff could just happen that didn't really tie in. There was no narrative thread tying stuff together.
Right. And if you were like, if someone was like writing down everything that happened, yeah, it made a story. But in 3rd edition, they actually integrated a story into it. Like that's part of the game, is working through the story, and you try to get to the good things to happen before the bad things to happen. I really enjoyed that version. I thought it was very similar to the card game. I'm looking forward to playing that again, as well as the card game. Sorry, I went off on a whole Arkham Horror rant here. So, but my apologies. Apologies, everybody, but that's my Arkham Horror experience.
We were talking about Arkham Horror. So
yeah, I want to get 3rd edition to the table. I played it once to learn it, and I got a few rounds in by myself, and I was like, okay, I've learned it. But I died very quickly. Like my guy died like 2 turns in, and I was like, okay, let me roll another character. But I've played 2nd edition quite a bit, and it's a game of moving around and stuff happening to you, and it's got a weird ebb and flow. You're either doing a lot of stuff and you feel the pressure, or you're doing absolutely nothing, and because the game just isn't coming at you hard enough, and you're just like, well, I guess I'm gonna go over here and something will happen to me. And then you go through like 4 or 5 rounds of nothing happening just because of the way the cards come out. So I've compared it a lot to when I talked about it before, the Arabian Nights. It's a game where you do stuff and stuff happens to you. And sometimes really cool stuff happens, and other times nothing happens. And that really makes or breaks the gaming experience when you have just this 6-hour game of waiting for something. Like you can't even do it. You can't get to the end state because the game isn't giving you what you need to get there. It's not putting a portal out. It's not putting the monster type you need to kill out. And I think from the sounds of it, I think the 3rd edition kind of handles that more because it custom builds that deck specifically for your scenario.
I agree. It does a much better job. I think that's a pretty apt comparison between that and Tales of the Arabian Nights, because it sets itself up, and it's obviously 2 different games, but like Tales of the Arabian Nights, it sets itself up as kind of this morality story, but it's not, because if you could do very good things and bad things happen to you, or you could do very bad things and be rewarded. It's just very random what happens to you, and you're making choices, but you have no idea what's going to happen. So I think that's a real apt comparison between that and 2nd edition, because you're right. There's a whole lot of like, oh, I guess I'll walk around and see what happens now. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's 10 co-op games we've talked about in detail. But
probably about 20 that we talked about.
Well, in detail, yeah. But still, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are co-op games designed for parents to play with their kids. There are co-op party games. There are co-op games about police officers and firefighters, and there's just anything you can think of. There's just so many good co-op games out there. We can't talk about all of them, but we just wanted to list some of our favorites. But next time we do one of these mechanisms videos, come vote in our poll so we can talk about the games you think are just the best, most iconic, whatever. And you do that by joining our Facebook group or joining our Discord. Come chat with us there. But yeah, go ahead and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss one of these Gaming Through Mechanism videos. But until next time, that's Erock, that's Tiffany, that's Lloyd, I'm Steven. We are Just Got Played. Thanks for joining us.
Indeed. Happy gaming.
Bye.
Hi-oh, yeah.